Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the mining drill cut through the asteroid rock. The air was thin and hot, but he was used to it. All humans were used to things that would kill other aliens in minutes. That was why. They were here, floating in space, doing the jobs nobody else could do. The mining ship Ironclad was not pretty. It was old, patched with metal plates, and smelled like oil and human sweat. But it worked, and that was all that mattered to the Veltar Corporation. They owned the ship, the equipment, and according to their contracts, they owned the humans who worked on it too. Jake had been captain of this crew for 5 years. He knew every person on board. There was Ben Carter, who could fix any machine, with just spare parts and determination. There was Lisa Rodriguez, the best mining engineer in the sector. She could read rock formations like other people read books. There was Danny Murphy, barely 22, who sent half his pay back to his family on Earth. The work was dangerous. The asteroids here contained rare metals that powered alien ships and cities. But the asteroids also leaked radiation, had unstable gravity, and sometimes exploded without warning. Other alien species sent robots to do this work. The robots always broke down or got destroyed. So they sent humans instead. Humans were cheaper than robots. Jake walked through the ship, checking on his crew. They worked in shifts around the clock. Sleep came in 4-hour blocks between shifts. Food was protein bars and vitamin water. The aliens said this was enough to keep humans healthy. The aliens were often wrong about what humans needed to stay alive. In the engineering section, Lisa was working on the new quotas. The Veltar Corporation had decided they needed more metal extracted each day. This meant longer shifts, fewer breaks, and pushing the equipment harder than it was designed to handle. "These numbers don't make sense," Lisa said, showing Jake her calculations. "If we run the drills this hard, they'll overheat. If we work shifts this long, people will make mistakes. Mistakes out here get people killed." Jake looked at the orders on his tablet. The alien supervisors had been clear. Meet the quotas or lose the contract. If humans lost the contract, another species would get the job. That species would probably be the Cricks, who could work in vacuum but needed expensive life support for the radiation. "We'll make it work," Jake said. "We always do." But he was worried. In 30 years since humans had joined the galactic community, they had always been the ones doing the dangerous jobs. They worked in radioactive mines, fought in alien wars, and lived on planets that would poison other species. And every time, the aliens in charge pushed them a little harder. The humans called themselves Deathworlders because they came from Earth. Earth was a planet that most aliens considered uninhabitable. Too much gravity, too much radiation from the sun, too many deadly animals and plants and diseases. But humans had evolved there. They were tough in ways that other species couldn't understand. The galaxy had a use for that toughness. There were jobs that needed to be done, places that needed to be worked, fights that needed to be fought. The aliens were happy to let humans do those jobs. They paid enough to keep humans alive and working, but not enough to make them rich or comfortable, too. Days later, the new quota started. Jake watched his crew push themselves harder than ever before. Ben worked 80-hour shifts keeping the machines running. Danny operated drilling equipment that was running so hot it glowed red. Lisa supervised operations while running on. 3 hours of sleep. The Veltar supervisors watched from their safe, climate-controlled section of the ship. They were tall, blue-skinned aliens who breathed a different atmosphere than humans. They wore full environmental suits when they visited the human sections. But mostly they stayed in their own area and sent orders through computer messages. On the third day of the new quotas, the air recycling system started having problems. The machines that cleaned carbon dioxide from the air and replaced it with oxygen were overloaded. Too many people working too hard in too small a space. Jake requested permission to slow down operations until they could fix the air system. The Veltar supervisors denied the request. They said the air was still within acceptable levels for human physiology. They had charts and data that proved humans could work safely with less oxygen. Jake had learned not to argue with alien science. The aliens always had studies and research that showed humans could survive more than humans thought they could survive. Sometimes the aliens were right, sometimes they were wrong. When they were wrong, humans died, but there was nothing Jake could do except follow orders and hope his crew would be okay. Lisa was working in the deepest part of the mining operation when it happened. The air was thinnest there, and the work was hardest. She was checking a drill that had started making strange noises. The drill was important. If it broke down, they would miss their quotas. Ben found her an hour later. She had collapsed next to the drill, her oxygen meter reading levels that were too low for human survival. He carried her to the medical bay, but it was too late. Lisa Rodriguez, who could read asteroids like books and fix any problem with mining equipment, was dead at 28 years old. The medical scanner confirmed what Ben already knew. Oxygen deprivation. She had suffocated slowly while trying to keep the operation running. Jake stood in the medical bay looking at Lisa's body. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. But she was never going to wake up. She was never going to send messages to her sister on Mars. She was never going to laugh at Ben's terrible jokes. She was never going to solve another impossible engineering problem. She was dead because the Veltar Corporation had decided that human lives were worth less than meeting quotas on time. Jake had been angry before. Every human in space had been angry before. They were angry about the low pay, the dangerous conditions, the way aliens talked about them like they were not really people. But this was different. This was not anger anymore. This was something deeper and colder and more dangerous than anger. Jake walked to his captain's quarters and activated the long-range communications array. He sent the same message to every human ship, station, and colony in the sector. Then he sent it to every human settlement he could reach. The message was simple, but every human who received it understood exactly what it meant. The message said, "Enough." The message spread through human space like wildfire. Captain Jake Morrison's single word reached mining ships in the outer belt, military units on alien worlds, and medical teams in galactic hospitals. Within 6 hours, every human in known space had received the same simple message, "Enough." Commander Paul Bradley was fixing a fusion reactor on Titan Station when his communicator buzzed. Titan Station was the biggest fuel processing plant in the galaxy. It turned raw hydrogen into the energy that powered alien ships across 3 sectors. Paul and his team of 32 humans kept the reactors running 24 hours a day. Paul read Jake's message and understood immediately. He looked around at his crew. They were all humans, all working in areas too dangerous for other species. The reactors leaked radiation that would kill most aliens in minutes. But humans could work there with just basic protection suits. "Listen up," Paul called to his team. "We're done here." His second-in-command, Carol Jenkins, looked up from a control panel. "Done with what?" "Done with all of it," Paul said. "Pack your tools. We're leaving." Within an hour, Paul's entire team had shut down their equipment and headed for the docking bay. The alien supervisors tried to stop them, but Paul ignored their protests. The supervisors were Zentarians, a species that looked like walking lizards with 4 arms. They were good at managing schedules and supplies, but they had no idea how the reactors actually worked. "You cannot leave," said Supervisor Clicks. "You have contracts. You have duties." "We quit," Paul said simply. "All of us." "But who will maintain the reactors?" Paul handed Clicks a datapad with technical manuals. "Good luck," he said. The same scene was happening across the galaxy. Dr. Maria Santos was leading the evacuation of human medical staff from New Geneva Hospital. The hospital treated patients from dozens of different species, but humans made up most of the medical team. They were the only species willing to work with dangerous alien diseases and unstable patients. Maria had been a doctor for 15 years. She had saved thousands of alien lives, worked through epidemic outbreaks, and performed surgeries that other species said were impossible. But she was tired of being treated like a useful tool instead of a person. When the hospital administration learned that all their human staff was leaving, they called an emergency meeting. The chief administrator was a Polarian, a floating, jellyfish-like creature that spoke through electronic translation. "This is unacceptable," the administrator sighed. "You cannot abandon your patients." "We're not abandoning anyone," Maria replied. "We're leaving detailed instructions for all treatments and procedures. We've prepared medicine supplies for the next 6 months. We've even translated everything into 12 different languages. But you are the only ones who can perform trauma surgery on multiple species." "Then you should have treated us better," Maria said quietly. She led her team of doctors and nurses out of the hospital. They took nothing that belonged to the hospital, but they took all their knowledge and experience with them on the military station Outpost 7. Colonel Rick Davis was commanding a human defense unit protecting a trade route through hostile space. The space around the trade route was full of radiation storms and gravity anomalies that destroyed alien ships. Human ships could survive the trip, so human soldiers guarded the route. When Rick received Jake's message, he called his unit. Together, there were 48 human soldiers under his command. They had been protecting alien traders for 3 years without losing a single convoy. "We're going home," Rick announced. Sergeant Amy Foster raised her hand. "What about the trade route?" "Not our problem anymore," Rick said. "The Alien Trade Council sent urgent messages begging Rick to reconsider. The trade route was worth billions of credits. Without human protection, alien ships would have to take routes that were 3 times longer and twice as expensive." Rick sent one message back: "Find someone else." The pattern repeated everywhere humans worked. Mining operations shut down when human crews walked away from equipment only they could operate. Space construction projects stopped when human workers left scaffolding in vacuum conditions that would kill other species. Research stations closed when human scientists took their expertise and headed for human space. The aliens who employed humans tried everything to make them stay. They offered pay increases, better working conditions, and promises of future respect. But humans had heard promises before. They had been hearing promises for 30 years while watching friends die in preventable accidents. Commander Bradley's team reached the transport ship they had hidden in Titan Station's outer dock. It was an old human cargo ship that they had been secretly modifying for months. Like humans everywhere, they had been preparing for this day without knowing exactly when it would come. Dr. Santos and her medical team joined a convoy of human ships leaving the core worlds. They carried with them medical supplies they had legally purchased and research data they had developed themselves. They left behind only what belonged to their former employers. Colonel Davis led his soldiers to a human settlement in the outer rim. It was a world the aliens had dismissed as too dangerous to colonize. The gravity was too strong, the storms too violent, and the native animals too aggressive. For humans, it was just another place to call home. As human ships left alien space, they followed routes that had been planned years in advance. There were hidden supply depots, secret refueling stations, and emergency shelters that only humans knew about. While the galaxy had seen humans as useful workers, humans had been building their own network of resources and safe havens. The exodus was not panicked or rushed. It was organized, methodical, and complete. Humans took their personal belongings, their knowledge, and their skills. They left behind detailed manuals, supply inventories, and instructions for basic maintenance. They were not trying to hurt the galaxy. They were simply refusing to be hurt by it anymore. In human space, leaders like Admiral Nicole Hayes were coordinating the largest migration in galactic history. Millions of humans were coming home to worlds they had built and defended while working for alien employers. These worlds were harsh and dangerous by galactic standards, but they were perfect for the species that had evolved on Earth. The message had been simple: enough. But its meaning was clear to every human who received it. Enough exploitation, enough dangerous work for minimal pay, enough being treated as expendable, enough dying for alien convenience. The galaxy would learn what it meant to lose its Deathworlders, and humans would learn what it meant to work for themselves. The first system failed on the 4th day after the humans left. It was the fusion reactor on Titan Station. the same one that Commander Paul Bradley and his team had been maintaining. The Zentarian supervisors had tried to follow the technical manuals the humans left behind, but the instructions might as well have been written in ancient languages. Supervisor Clicks stood in the reactor control room, staring at warning lights he did not understand. The manual said to adjust plasma flow to compensate for magnetic field fluctuations, but Clicks had no idea what that meant. The reactor was still running, but it was making noises that seemed wrong. On the second week, the reactor began shutting down automatically. The safety systems that Paul's team had installed were working perfectly, protecting the station from a meltdown. But they also meant that Titan Station could no longer produce fuel for the ships that depended on it. The station administrator called the Galactic Council in panic. "We need the humans back immediately," she said. "The reactor is failing and we cannot fix it." "Hire engineers from another species," came the reply. "No other species can work in the radiation levels near the reactor core. Only humans can survive there long enough to make repairs." The council member was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Find a solution." But there was no solution. The reactor stayed offline, and fuel production in that sector dropped by 60%. Ambassador Kethler of the Andromedan Alliance was reviewing economic reports in his office when he began to understand the scope of the crisis. The Andromedans were one of the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. They prided themselves on their intelligence and careful planning, but Kethler's reports showed a pattern that made no sense. Trade routes were closing because ships could not get fuel. Mining operations were shutting down because the miners had disappeared. Military positions were being abandoned because the soldiers had gone home. All of these problems had one thing in common: they involved humans. Kethler pulled up employment records for the last 10 years. What he found shocked him. Humans made up less than 5% of the galactic population, but they worked in over 30% of all critical positions. They were not just doing dangerous jobs. They were doing impossible jobs that no other species could or would do. The mining operations in the Kepler belt required workers who could survive radiation levels that would kill most aliens in hours. Only humans could work there. The military stations in unstable space needed soldiers who could function in environments with gravity fluctuations and electromagnetic storms. Only humans could do that job too. The medical centers that treated emergency cases from multiple species needed doctors who could work with deadly diseases and toxic alien biology. Human doctors were the only ones willing to take those risks. Kethler realized that for 30 years, the galaxy had been depending on human toughness without understanding how much they needed it. The humans had not just been doing dangerous work, they had been holding the entire galactic economy together. Admiral Chunwei had planned this moment for 5 years. While other humans worked for alien employers, Chang had been secretly documenting every critical system that depended on human workers. He knew which space stations needed human engineers, which trade routes required human protection, and which colonies would fail without human support. Chung's database showed that humans were involved in 43% of all galactic infrastructure. They maintained power plants on hostile worlds, operated mining equipment in deadly environments, and provided security in regions too dangerous for other species. Now, Chun watched from his command center on New Terra as his predictions came true. The Galactic Stock Exchange had crashed when traders realized that cargo ships could not travel through dangerous space without human crews. Supply chains were breaking down as manufacturing centers lost their human workers. The Zephyrian Empire had already lost 3 colonies. Without human miners to extract resources from radioactive asteroids, the colonies could not maintain their technology. Without human soldiers to guard dangerous space routes, the colonies could not receive supplies. Emperor Zeftok of the Zephyrians had been one of the loudest critics of human primitive behavior. He had often said that humans were useful but would never be truly civilized. Now his empire was shrinking because he could not replace the primitive humans who had been protecting his territory on the planet Zarian. The atmospheric processors that made the air breathable for alien colonists began failing. The processors worked by filtering toxic gases through chemical reactions that produced deadly byproducts. Human technicians had maintained the processors because they could work in the toxic environment with protective gear. Other species needed full environmental suits that were too bulky for the maintenance work. Without the human technicians, the processors broke down one by one. The alien colonists had to evacuate or risk suffocation. A planet that had been home to 12 million aliens was abandoned in 3 weeks. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions every day, but they had no solutions. Council member after council member stood up to report the same problem: critical. Systems were failing because humans were no longer there to maintain them. Perhaps we should offer the humans better working conditions, suggested Councillor Velinara of the Tau Ceti Alliance. We already tried that, replied Councillor Morden of the Centauri Republic. They are not responding to any offers. They have simply vanished into their own space. Then we must force them to return, said Councillor Zethkar of the Hegemony. With what army? Asked Councillor Velinara. 70% of our military forces were human units. They took their ships and equipment when they left. The council fell silent. They were facing a problem they had never imagined. A species that was essential to galactic civilization had decided to leave, and there was nothing the galaxy could do to stop them. Dr. Maria Santos read the reports from her new office on the human world of Haven. The reports came from alien medical centers across the galaxy, and they all told the same story. Without human doctors and nurses, the medical centers could not treat patients from multiple species. The knowledge of cross-species medicine that humans had developed over 30 years was gone. Alien doctors could treat their own species well enough, but modern galactic medicine required specialists who understood the biology of dozens of different races. Humans had been those specialists because they were willing to risk exposure to alien diseases and toxins. Now, Maria watched as medical centers across the galaxy reverted to treating only their own species. Interspecies medicine, one of the great achievements of galactic civilization, was disappearing because the people who made it possible had decided they were tired of being taken for granted. The Peltari Syndicate tried to automate their mining operations with robots. The robots lasted 6 days in the radioactive asteroid field before their circuits were fried. The cost of replacing them would have been 20 times what they had paid human workers. The Corvan Trade Alliance hired mercenaries to protect their convoys through dangerous space. The mercenaries demanded 10 times the pay that human soldiers had received, and they still lost 2 ships in the first week. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. The humans they had dismissed as useful primitives had actually been irreplaceable specialists. And now those specialists were gone, taking with them 3 decades of knowledge and experience that could not be replaced overnight. In human space. Admiral Chun Wei smiled as he read the latest intelligence reports. The galaxy was struggling exactly as he had predicted. But humans were thriving in their own territory, using their toughness and skills to build something better than what they had left behind. The day the Deathworlders snapped was becoming the day the galaxy learned it could not survive without them. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was dying. Not all at once, but slowly, like a machine running out of parts. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 20th time, and the news was worse than ever. The Zephyrian Empire had lost half its territory. Without human soldiers to guard the dangerous frontier regions, they could not defend against raiders and pirates. Emperor Zeftok, who had once called humans barely civilized animals, now ruled over half the space he had controlled a year ago. The Veltar Corporation had filed for bankruptcy. Their mining operations had completely shut down when they could not find workers capable of surviving in radioactive environments. The few alien species brave enough to try had lasted less than a week before radiation sickness forced them to quit. Ambassador Kefler stood before the council with reports that made every member uncomfortable. We have lost 37% of our industrial capacity, he said. Trade volume is down 60%. 7 major colonies have been abandoned. The outer rim territories are completely cut off from the core worlds. Surely we can adapt, said Counselor Morden. We managed without humans before we met them. No, Kethler replied. We never managed without them. We just did not know we needed them. For 30 years humans have been doing jobs that we thought were simple but were actually impossible for anyone else. The truth was hard to accept. The galaxy had built its entire modern civilization on the assumption that humans would always be there to do the dangerous work. Without humans, the civilization was collapsing. On the human world of New Terra, President Nicole Hayes read the same reports in her office. New Terra was a planet the aliens had considered uninhabitable. The gravity was too strong, the weather too violent, and the native life too aggressive. But for humans, it was just another place to live. Nicole had been a mining supervisor before becoming president of the new human government. She understood exactly what the galaxy was going through because she had lived it from the other side. She knew how many impossible jobs humans had been doing, and she knew the galaxy could not replace them. The first alien delegation arrived on New Terra 2 weeks later. They came in a ship designed for diplomatic missions with full life support, systems, and environmental protection. Even with all their technology, they needed special equipment just to survive on the planet's surface. The delegation leader was Ambassador Crickstall of the Polarian Union. He was one of the floating, jellyfish-like creatures that communicated through electronic translation devices. He had never spoken directly to a human before. President Hayes, Crickstall said through his translator, we come to negotiate the return of human workers to galactic society. Nicole met the delegation in a simple conference room. She wore no special equipment and breathed the planet's air without assistance. The contrast was not lost on the aliens who needed environmental suits just to sit in the same room. We are not workers anymore, Nicole said quietly. We are an independent civilization. If you want to negotiate, you negotiate with equals. The delegation from the Veltar Corporation arrived the next day. They were led by Executive Director Velfin, the same alien who had ordered the quotas that killed Lisa Rodriguez. He came with contracts and payment offers, expecting to hire humans back like they had never left. Nicole refused to see him. Instead, she sent engineer Kyle Thompson to meet with the delegation. Kyle had been Lisa's partner and best friend. He had held her hand as she died from oxygen deprivation. You want to hire human miners, Kyle said to Velfin. Why should we work for the people who killed Lisa Rodriguez? That was an unfortunate accident, Velfin replied. We have reviewed our safety protocols. It was not an accident, Kyle said. You reduced life support below safe levels to increase profits. You knew humans would die, and you decided their deaths were acceptable losses. Velfin tried to offer more money, better conditions, and promises of safety improvements. But Kyle was not interested in negotiations. If you want human miners, he said, you will first face human justice for Lisa's death. The Veltar delegation left without an agreement. More delegations came every week. The Andromedan Alliance offered trade partnerships. The Centauri Republic offered technology exchanges. The Hegemony offered military alliances. Every major power in the galaxy wanted humans to come back and resume their old roles, but humans were not interested in resuming their old roles. They had spent 6 months building their own civilization in their own space. They had cities on planets too dangerous for other species. They had industries that other aliens could not operate. They had military forces that could go places other species could not survive. Admiral Chenwei met with the military delegations. He showed them maps of human territory, which now included dozens of worlds and regions the galaxy had written off as uninhabitable. You want our soldiers back, he said. But our soldiers now defend human interests, not alien interests. Dr. Maria Santos met with medical delegations. She had established the Human Medical Corps as an independent organization with its own hospitals, research facilities, and training programs. You want our doctors back, she said. But our doctors now serve humanity first. The aliens tried to understand what humans wanted. They offered money, technology, territory, and political power. But humans already had all of those things in their own space. What they wanted was something the galaxy had never given them. Respect. Captain Jake Morrison, whose message had started the Exodus, now commanded the human defense fleet. When alien military commanders asked him to return to protecting alien trade routes, he asked them a simple question: why should human soldiers die to protect alien profits? The alien commanders had no good answer. For 30 years, they had sent humans to fight in the most dangerous regions of space, because human lives were considered less valuable than alien lives. Now they wanted those same humans to come back and resume dying for alien convenience. The negotiations went nowhere. Every alien delegation left New Terra with the same message: humans would consider returning to galactic society, but only as equals. They would not go back to being the galaxy's expendable workforce. The galaxy faced a choice that its leaders had never imagined. They could adapt to life without humans, which meant accepting a much smaller and less advanced civilization. Or they could accept humans as equal partners, which meant giving up the comfortable assumption that some species were more valuable than others. Some alien civilizations chose to adapt. They developed new technologies, formed new alliances, and learned to live within their limitations. The Tau Ceti Alliance managed to maintain most of their territory by focusing on worlds that did not require human-level toughness to inhabit. Other civilizations chose to collapse rather than change. The Corvan Trade Alliance dissolved when they could not maintain their trade routes through dangerous space. The hegemony split into smaller factions that fought over the remaining habitable worlds, but a few alien leaders began to understand what humans really wanted. Ambassador Kefler of the Andromedan Alliance was the first to propose a new kind of relationship. Instead of hiring human workers, he suggested forming a true partnership between human and alien civilizations. "We have been thinking about this." "Wrong," Kefler told his government. "We keep trying to get humans to work for us. Instead, we should try to work with them." It was a radical idea that would require the galaxy to completely change how it thought about humans. But as the months passed and the crisis deepened, more alien leaders began to realize that radical change might be their only option. The day the Deathworlders snapped was becoming the day the galaxy learned that survival required more than just technology and numbers. It required the strength to do impossible things and the wisdom to respect the people who had that strength. 2 years had passed since the humans left galactic society. The galaxy had changed completely, split between those who adapted and those who collapsed. The negotiations between humans and aliens had been slow, difficult, and sometimes bitter. But finally an agreement was reached. The Andromedan Alliance was the first to accept humans as true partners. Ambassador Kefler had convinced his government that working with humans was better than trying to replace them. The alliance offered to share technology and resources in exchange for human expertise in dangerous environments. President Nicole Hayes signed the first partnership agreement in the same conference room where she had refused the early demands for human workers to return. This time, the alien delegation came not as employers, but as equals seeking cooperation. "This is not about humans working for aliens," Nicole said during the signing ceremony. "This is about different species working together, each contributing what they do best." The partnership worked because both sides benefited. Humans provided services that aliens needed: mining in radioactive zones, construction in hostile environments, and medical treatment for dangerous diseases. In return, aliens shared advanced technology that made human life easier and safer. Captain Jake Morrison became the first human admiral in the newly formed Galactic Defense Cooperative. The cooperative was different from the old military structure. Because humans and aliens served together as partners, not as expendable troops under alien command, Jake's first assignment was to protect the same trade routes his people had once guarded as low-paid soldiers. But now human crews were paid the same as alien crews, worked under the same safety standards, and had the same right to refuse dangerous missions. "The difference," Jake told his mixed crew of humans and aliens, "is that we are here because we choose to be here, not because we have no other choice." Dr. Maria Santos established the Interspecies Medical Institute, a joint organization where human and alien doctors worked together. The institute was different from the old hospitals because humans were not just employees, but full partners in medical research and treatment. Maria's greatest achievement was developing new treatments that combined human medical knowledge with alien technology. The institute saved lives across the galaxy, and Maria became the first human to receive the Galactic Medical Honor, an award that had previously only been given to aliens. Engineer Kyle Thompson returned to mining, but as the Director of Safety Standards for the Galactic Mining Consortium, his first act was to establish the Lisa Rodriguez Memorial Safety Protocol, which required that all workers, human and alien, receive life support systems that exceeded minimum survival requirements. Kyle personally inspected every mining operation to ensure that no worker would die from preventable causes like oxygen deprivation or radiation exposure. The protocol was named after his friend who had died because alien supervisors valued profits more than human lives. Lisa died because they thought human lives were cheap, Kyle said at the memorial ceremony. These protocols ensure that no worker of any species will be considered expendable. The Veltar Corporation faced human justice for Lisa Rodriguez's death. Executive Director Velthan and two other executives were tried in human courts for criminal negligence resulting in death. They were found guilty and sentenced to work in the same dangerous conditions they had forced on humans. With the same inadequate life support systems, the trial was broadcast across the galaxy and became a symbol of the new relationship between humans and aliens. For the first time, aliens faced consequences for treating human lives as worthless. Not every alien civilization joined the new partnership system. The hegemony refused to treat humans as equals and attempted to continue their old practices with robotic workers. The robots failed consistently, and the hegemony eventually collapsed into smaller factions that fought over dwindling resources. The Zephyrian Empire tried to hire mercenaries to replace human soldiers, but the mercenaries were expensive and ineffective. Emperor Zeftok, who had once called humans primitive, eventually signed a partnership agreement that gave humans equal status in his military forces. "We have learned," Zeftok announced to his people, "that survival is more important than pride." Admiral Chenwei became the chief coordinator for human space operations. His hidden database of galactic infrastructure proved invaluable in negotiations, as it showed exactly how much the galaxy had depended on human workers. Chun used his knowledge to ensure that humans received fair compensation for their contributions. Every partnership agreement included provisions for human safety, equal pay, and the right to refuse assignments that violated human ethical standards. The new galactic order was built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Humans provided services that other species could not, but they did so as partners who were valued for their unique abilities, rather than exploited for their willingness to take risks. Commander Paul Bradley returned to Titan Station, but as the co-director of operations rather than a maintenance worker. He worked alongside Zentarian engineers to develop new safety protocols that protected both human and alien workers. The station that had once operated on human sacrifice now became a model of interspecies cooperation. The fusion reactors ran more efficiently than ever because human expertise was combined with alien technology to create better systems. Some things in the galaxy never recovered from the human exodus. Entire sectors remained uninhabitable because no other species could maintain the infrastructure in hostile environments. Trade routes that had once connected distant civilizations were permanently closed because the regions were too dangerous for non-human ships, but other things became better than they had ever been. Medical science advanced rapidly when human and alien knowledge were combined. Engineering projects that had been impossible became routine when human toughness was paired with alien technology. The mining operation where Lisa Rodriguez had died was converted into a memorial and training center. New workers of all species learned about safety protocols and the importance of treating every life as valuable. Lisa's name was carved into the station's hull in 12 languages, with a simple message below it: Never again will any worker die for convenience. Years later, when young aliens learned galactic history, they were taught about the day the Deathworlders snapped. But the story was not told as a tale of rebellion or war. It was told as the day the galaxy learned that strength comes in many forms, and that the strongest civilizations are built on respect for all who contribute to them. Human children learned the story too, but from a different perspective. They learned that their ancestors had been strong enough to survive on a death world, tough enough to do impossible jobs, and brave enough to demand the respect they deserved. The whispers that followed humanity across the galaxy were no longer whispers of fear or dismissal. They were whispers of respect, spoken by aliens who had learned that the primitive Deathworlders were actually the foundation upon which galactic civilization was built. In the end, the day the Deathworlders snapped became the day the galaxy grew up. It learned that true strength is not about who can dominate others, but about who can build something better together. And it learned that the most dangerous beings in the universe are not those who are strongest, but those who refuse to be taken for granted. The galaxy still whispers about that day, but now the whispers carry a different message. Respect is earned through strength, but wisdom comes from knowing when to use that strength to build rather than destroy.